Great to have you both. Joe, I'll start off with you. What, in your view, is the greatest political risk that the markets are digesting right now?
Well, I think this elevates the possibility for a contested election, and markets in the month of September, we're clearly concerned about that. The news this morning certainly elevates that possibility.
Yeah. Joe, your view? I mean, Jim, sorry.
No, I think that the markets hate uncertainty, and that's what we're seeing most this morning too. But there's something I'd like to point out too, is that the reaction to that uncertainty is generally fueled by market position and people's attitude towards risk going into it. When we started this, even just yesterday, the VIX is still up around 30, which suggests to me that people know that there's risks ahead. Even a week and a half ago, the Nasdaq bottomed after a 15% correction. So what I'm saying is that if we were at all-time highs, the VIX was at 12, and all of a sudden we were to price in this dramatically uncertain event, I think their market reaction could have been much more severe. Right now, I'm not all that worried about the market's reaction. The market's job is to price in worst case scenarios and then work backwards from there. So I think as long as the Nasdaq stays above 11,000, I'm relatively okay with the way the market's performed so far.
So basically that 4% or so decline in the month of September on the S&P 500, that's really helping the markets this morning absorb this shock.
I believe there's no question about that. I think that when people are caught off guard and everyone's on one side of the boat, that's when the shocks become much more severe. And you said the 4% decline in the S&P over the month, but at the lows in the Nasdaq, they were down 15%. So to me, that shows that some of the hedges were trimmed prior to this, and there's not as much chance for a market panic until the story develops, perhaps at that point in time. But right now, it's still uncertain.
Joe, we've been talking to a lot of people about this morning. We spoke to a political strategist at Fundstrat. He said one risk is that President Trump himself, the greatest asset of his own campaign, cannot campaign. And so therefore, his state might be a little bit weakened going into this election. And then your cohort on the halftime report, Jenny Harrington, also said that markets were pricing in a Biden victory. All the endowments, pension funds that she's been talking to have all priced this in. Talk about offsides. I mean, if you believe that, then maybe the markets are offsides in terms of believing in a Biden victory. We saw what happened 4 years ago when people were offsides on pricing in a Hillary victory.
Well, I'm not going to speculate on the outcome of the election. I think that's proven to be foolish over previous elections. Yeah, it's a hypothetical. But I would say this: what doesn't change, Melissa, is the $90 trillion worth of global liquidity that sits underneath the market. And that acts as kind of the hand and supportive instrument for the markets. I would say this. Certainly, I mentioned before, elevating the potential for a contested election. I think there are other conditions that are elevated. I think we need to focus more on what the labor report is going to look like this morning. We're seeing a little bit of a downward trend in the monthly gains for non-farm payrolls. Certainly the news from Disney, American Airlines, United Airlines, that was important this week. We know that the House is supposed to leave until after the election. We don't have a stimulus bill, and we largely need one. So I think that elevates the importance of the labor report this morning. I also think next week's vice presidential debate between Vice President Pence and Kamala Harris, certainly that is something that I think Americans will be watching now that we have this news even more. But I think we're all waiting for President Trump's tweet this morning, which I'm sure at some point we will get, and we'll see how markets react once we get that.
The tweet meaning the tweet that will supposedly prop up the markets, Joe, or what kind of tweet are we talking about?
Well, what is contained in the president's tweet, only he will know, but I'm sure he will be using Twitter aggressively to communicate with the American citizens.
Shepard Smith here. Thanks for watching CNBC on YouTube.